And we're live. Hello, everyone.
Hi, Colin.
Hey, lovely to be here.
Okay, there is still something wrong with our with my sound from the looks of things, but I'm going to try and keep it as soundproof as possible here. I have my hands over this. We've been waiting for this. There's a couple of people coming in. I'm sure there's going to be a lot more coming in as we go along, and I want to give everybody a chance to ask a lot of questions, but guys, let's introduce everybody. Everybody knows Matt, my co-admin in the group. Adrian, can you tell us something about yourself before we get into the nitty-gritty?
Yes, of course I can. So I'm Adrian. I'm one of the co-founders of Una Brands. Una Brands was launched a couple of months ago, and we acquire Amazon FBA and other e-commerce businesses in Australia and across the region. We've just closed a $50 million funding round, and we're looking to spend that in the space of the next kind of 12 months or so, with the majority of that spending happening in Australia. So we've closed our first 3 deals in Australia, and we are very active in the region.
So you've got $50 million to spend. That's my understanding.
That's right. Yep.
And everybody that's listening is now going to be saying, "How can I get a piece of this cake?" Is that right?
Yes. Come and speak to me. That's how.
That's serious, proper money. That's not someone mucking around. That's having a fair crack there.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we're expecting to buy kind of 25 businesses or so over the as I say, the next year. Probably 15 or 20 of which will be in Australia. So yes, very, very active.
Very cool.
So everybody who's listening, I want you to ask us a lot of questions. I'll probably keep them for the end. We're starting already to get some hellos. Oh my goodness, my voice. It's duplicating on me. All right. I'm going to try and shush because it's on my end. The problem is on my end. I'm going to leave you guys to have the chat. Yeah, tell us more about it. Do you want to ask the questions, Matt?
Yeah, look, I'll ask you a question. So, obviously, for you to be able to start up a new business doing this, and you've obviously got some prior history and background and things like that. For someone to want to give you $50 million of investor capital to do this sort of thing, this idea of acquisitions and consolidation of brands and things like that must be a fairly hot thing globally, is it? The moment?
It's a enormously hot thing, Matt. Yes, there's been huge interest in this space over the past year or so, and that's evidence. I don't know whether you guys saw the Empire Flippers report which came out, but they've had 66% increased volume of e-commerce sales this year compared to last year. And that's really been driven by a few different things. One of which, the kind of most important factor, really, I guess, is the impact from COVID last year. So COVID obviously created this huge behavioral shift where people were forced to move online. And for a lot of sellers, depending on the category, but for a lot of sellers, that created, therefore, their best ever years in terms of sales. So obviously, on the back of that piqued a lot of investor interest. I guess a second factor, though, is the kind of proof point around this business model, which is that this business model was really started about 18 months ago. And when it was first started, it was unclear how successful it was going to be, whether there was any long-term longevity in the model. But really, those fears have now been put to bed. The model has been proved to be successful. And I guess people were kind of waiting to see what the outcome would be. But now that that's kind of been shown to be successful, a lot of capital is getting interested in the market. I guess capital which previously didn't really understand the market. You're talking about very institutional players with very long-term investment horizons and pretty traditional capital. Suddenly they're gaining confidence in this business model.
So when you say the model, tell us, for those who aren't familiar and watching, what do you mean by the model?
Yeah. Let's start there. So and our business model is that we buy businesses, and I think I saw one of the questions, which is what are the kind of criteria of the businesses. So we buy businesses that have a revenue of greater than about 400,000 Aussie dollar per year and less than about $10 million per year. And we buy those businesses not with the view to flipping them in 5 years' time, which is what the traditional kind of private equity model is, but rather with a view to integrating them, growing them long term. And then our exit strategy long term is IPO, to list on the public markets. Like we're not planning on going anywhere. This is, some people have compared us to the kind of the digital version of Unilever, where Unilever will buy lots of small brands and then bring them under one umbrella. And by doing that, they're able to leverage enormous scale benefits by bringing the operations in-house, the legal, the HR, the technology, but also streamlining the inventory management, the procurement. Obviously, there are big scale benefits to kind of the procurement side of things. And then on the revenue side of things, pushing these products out to multiple platforms, multiple geographies, and expanding the products, investing to expand the products in a way that small businesses may not be able to have the capital to do so.
That's cool. Yeah, very good. So this is primarily Amazon, fulfillment by Amazon type brands. That's the main focus you have at the moment?
Yeah, exactly. So it's not only FBA brands. We've also just acquired a Shopify business, and we're very interested in Shopify businesses. At some point, we'll also be looking at pure eBay businesses. I guess the difficulty is though that we only buy own brand labels. We don't buy resellers, and you tend to find own brand labels more on Shopify and Amazon, whereas so far we've been finding a lot more resellers based on eBay. And the reason why we focus on own brand labels, there's a few reasons. One, when you're talking about Amazon, if you're your own brand label, then you don't have to compete for the buy box, which is obviously a huge advantage. But secondly, even outside of Amazon, having your own brand gives you defensibility in a market which can otherwise be quite like hugely competitive. And so we like own labels. We in terms of the other criteria, we also buy businesses that have more than 80% of their revenue coming from e-commerce channels. The businesses we've acquired so far have had, two of them are FBA businesses with 100% online, 100% FBA, typically buying from China, selling to the US, very small sales in Australia. But then with the Shopify business that we bought, sells again 100% online, but mainly in Australia.
So when you say Shopify, so Shopify is obviously just a website platform. If a business had built a significant business with their own brand and their own, all the other criteria, but they weren't using Shopify, they were using Magento or Neto or WooCommerce or anything like that. Is it Shopify specific, or is it just really more like website based online retail?
No, that's a great clarification. I should have said that. It's own website sellers. The majority that we're coming across at the moment are in Australia are Shopify, but yeah, certainly WooCommerce and Magento and all the others are very greatly.
So it's the main criteria is it's all about the brand and the and things like that, as opposed to the the platform is perhaps negotiable, but the fact that they have their own brand, that they with their own brand name is really the key.
Private label businesses, that's right.
Private label, that's exactly right.
Private label, or obviously developing their own products, etc., rather than being a reseller. So I think that's, hopefully that clarifies things for people. So when you're looking at these businesses to purchase them, whether they be FBA or otherwise, how do you value them in terms of what they're worth to start the conversation with a potential seller?
Yeah, sure. So the valuation is made up of two components. You have the profitability, and then you have the multiple that gets applied to that profitability. And the way that we look at the profitability, so these two components are kind of separate, and we look at them separately. So just looking at the profitability first, we look at the profitability in terms of the SDE, the seller's discretionary earning. And that's a little bit different to how other people might look at it. Sometimes people look at the EBIT or the EBITDA. which is the earnings before interest and tax and amortization and depreciation. The reason why we look at the seller's discretionary earning is because that adds back in the seller's salary. So I guess what you're trying to think is, if you have one business that makes $100,000, but the seller pays themselves $100,000 salary, you might think, well, that's zero profitability. You might have another business that makes $100,000 and the seller pays himself like a $10,000 salary, and you might say, well, that's a $90,000 profitability business. And so to be able to compare across those two businesses, we use the seller's discretionary earning, which takes out the seller's salary. So that's the kind of that's the valuation piece, and that's based on the trailing 12-month SDE. And then the second piece of the puzzle is the multiple piece, and the multiple piece is perhaps a bit more complex because there are more variables that go into that. Typically, we use a multiple which is based on the annual profitability. So typically that would be in the range of between 2 and 3 times the annual profitability. I think the Empire Flippers report again showed a big increase on last year, 13% increase on last year. And I think they're around 2.8 times as the average across the market. That's a little higher than than our range because the businesses they look at. Businesses we look at go down to very small businesses which have lower multiples, but typically the factors that go into the multiple is the size of the business. So the larger the business, the higher the multiple, and there I'm talking about the annual profitability. Secondly, the number of products that the business sells, and this one might surprise people, but typically the fewer the SKUs, the better for us because it makes them less complex businesses for us to run.
You don't want my business then.
What was that?
You don't want my business then. I know that I've got 20,000 SKUs at least on any given day. I've met some very interesting people who I'm quite in awe of, who have got businesses as big as mine, and they have 12 SKUs or something like that. And here I'm battling with 20,000. So but there's different business models for different people, and obviously you're filling a particular. You're looking for ones that fit the niche that fits what you guys want to do, and that's to be able to blend those again. That's fantastic. So. I find it astonishing as well. But so the three of us were both at Retail Global, and one of the talks I went to see was with the owner of Riff Raff Co., who again is 100% Amazon FBA business, turns over very, very, very healthy revenues. She has 4 SKUs. Wow.
In the kind of I won't say the revenue, but kind of very, very
so much easier to manage. Also, very risky though. We've got
there is that balance. So the way we look at it, typically a very attractive business would have less than 15 SKUs. A mid-level attractiveness would have maybe 15 to 50, and then a still attractive but less attractive business would have more than 50 SKUs. So that's on the kind of SKU side of things.
You've already answered this question. When you say Shopify business, would you also consider WooCommerce WordPress built business? Yes, we would. Julio, thank you for the question. There's a couple of questions that we've got from people who are watching. I don't know if
I'll just read them out I can read them out if you like.
They're a bit relevant to what we're saying here, so maybe we can expand a little bit. Go ahead, Matt.
So Katrina's asked, what are the advantages for small retailers in selling to you? For example, does the retailer get a percentage of future profits, or do they sell 100% for no interest? Like, why would someone sell to you rather than just keeping doing what they're doing if they're doing well?
Yes, very good question. A few different things. So firstly, they receive the upfront lump sum payment. And for a lot of sellers, that's a really good way to de-risk their investment portfolio or their business portfolio. It's definitely the market at the moment is definitely what you'd consider a seller's market because there's just a wall of capital which is currently waiting to be deployed in this space. What people call dry powder in the private equity world. And so it's unclear how long that will last for. Multiples are kind of at the highest they've ever been at the moment, on the back of the most successful year for e-commerce has ever had last year. But as we come out of lockdown, it's unclear, how that will affect people's revenues over the next year. In terms of multiples, my personal view is it's unlikely that multiples will decrease. We'll certainly see a stabilization, I would have thought, compared to the growth in multiples last year. But certainly for some people, it's a good way to take the chips off the table and to kind of cash in.
How much is multiple these days? What is?
So kind of between 2 and 3 times is a typical multiple. So that's the first reason. So for some people, managing an Amazon account and keeping up to date with the ever-changing Amazon algorithm can be pretty stressful and pretty difficult, and some people just are keen to kind of cash out for that reason. But then to answer the question around the kind of upside going forward, so yes, we really like to maintain a relationship with the sellers, and we will almost always offer a profit share going forward, which is kind of similar to a kind of royalty payment. And the way that typically is structured is that you would have the seller would receive a percentage of any increased profitability for a defined period of time going forward. The kind of benefit with that is that when we buy these businesses, we're not looking to kind of inch them up a couple of percent. We're looking for businesses that we can kind of 10x the revenue or the profitability, and so it's important that the sellers are able to participate in some of that upside. The other way that we like to kind of continue the relationship with the sellers, and a lot of the sellers actually choose to do this, is to stay involved as on a kind of consulting basis. So they might help out for a day a week or whatever, paid a decent consulting salary, but instead of having to do all of the tedious inventory management and customer service and all the rest of it, they get to focus on product development or branding or all of this stuff that's for
so
a lot
that
of people,
could be a really good chance for people to focus on the parts of the business maybe that they actually do love, which was the coming up with these crazy creative ideas or things like that, rather than worrying about what the latest Amazon policies or things like that. And
exactly it. Yeah, but so many sellers say to me, the reason why I started this was because I loved the idea of, building this product and then building a community of people who love this product and all this. But now I don't get to do any of that because now all of my time is tied up with, as you say, all the exactly.
Do you want to address this one?
So there's a question here. I don't actually even understand the question. I'll be perfectly blunt, but hopefully you will, Adrian. Vix has asked the question: what proportion of your offer goes towards earnout?
Yeah, sure. So there's kind of 3 components that goes into the offer. There's the base price, which is divided into 2 parts. There's a part which is paid up front, and then there's a portion which is kept for 1 year, which is called the stability payment, and that's paid out on condition that the revenue is the same or greater after a year, and that's typically in the range of 15% or so. And then the earnout, some people call it different things, so we call it the profit share, but some people call it the earnout, is paid on top of that. The earnout is typically, as I said, it's typically a percentage of increased profitability for a fixed period of time. And it's difficult to say what proportion is put onto the earnout, because you can't say what the growth is going to be. But let's suppose you were to assume a growth rate of kind of 40% year on year. The earnout or the profit share in that circumstance would be in the range of 20 or 30% of the total offer.
So he did know what she was talking about.
That's because he's a professional in his field, and we are just interviewers in this. We're learning too. It's good. So Diane has asked a question: if a business was not on any marketplace and sells only on their website, and had a turnover around 1.4 million, is that interesting? Sounds pretty
Extremely
interesting to me.
Please get in contact. Yes. So
with the obviously the important thing that the business has its own brands as opposed to being a pure reseller. Would that be correct?
And I'm going to give you this.
So we've just acquired a business that's very similar to the description that was put in there. Yeah, very, very, very attractive to us, those types of businesses, and keen to speak to any sellers in that position.
Awesome.
Yep. Fantastic. All right. So let's say a business has let's say a business has just recently invested in a new product launch, or they've invested in a whole ton of inventory, or they've invested in other big outlays just recently within the business.
Profit down, I'm guessing.
Yeah. How does that affect, I guess, your valuation and where you look at the businesses?
Yeah, sure. It's a question that comes up a lot, actually, because if people have just invested in developing a new product, they it'd be unfair to take that out of the profitability. And so the way we look at it with regards to inventory, for example, is that, and we use the analogy of kind of like if you were to buy a torch, you would expect it to come with the batteries that are needed to run the torch. But if it comes with 50 extra batteries, then you'd probably be willing to, which is going to mean that the torch can last a lifetime, you'd probably be willing to pay for those extra batteries on top. So the same is true of inventory. There's a certain amount of inventory which is required to run the business on a day-to-day basis, and that typically comes with the business as part of the base price. But there are some businesses that have just stocked up right before they speak to us, in which case they'll have a lot more inventory than just that amount that's required to run the business, and then that we will pay for at the time of acquisition on top of the base price.
And that's obviously profitability needs to take into account things like investment in inventory and things like that, because obviously if a business is running very lean and not buying much inventory, there might be more cash within the business, whereas if they've invested heavily in inventory, it might look like the profitability is a little lower, but they actually have built up that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so when we measure the profitability, we don't look at the like you might pull your P&L statement from zero, for example, and it would tell you spent this much on inventory. We don't use that line as the kind of cost of goods sold to calculate the profit. We instead look at the number of units that have been sold per product and multiply that by the landed cost per product to generate the cost line to calculate the profitability.
So in other words, there's a very logical and thought out way of doing it, but it's not necessarily the same as what you might give to the tax man.
That's a good way of putting it. Yeah.
Yep.
I
cool.
mean, the way that we do it is very fair. It's a very fair way to estimate the profit that a business generates. And
from my point of view, what you're saying, it actually does sound very fair, because I think that when you're dealing with the tax man, you're wanting to minimize the on-paper profits, regardless of reality. Not obviously like the great man Kerry Packer once said. We don't. I can't remember the exact quote, but basically, I've never evaded tax, and I firmly go against any suggestion of evaded tax. However, of course, I minimise my tax, and any Australian who doesn't try to minimise their tax wants their head read. It's a very famous quote in a Senate committee thing back in the day. I'll send you the video later. It's a classic, but I think the fact that you're valuing your business, the businesses you're purchasing, based on what people would see as the reality rather than the reality for the tax man, sounds very fair to people who are selling to you, I think.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah, because we want to be transparent in the way that we value businesses, because it helps everybody to understand exactly where they stand and where the calculation has come from, I think.
Yeah, cool.
I'm going to intervene and say that Julio has just launched his first product. He's just sold his first, 100 units, I think. I'm not quite sure.
Well done, Helio.
I've been drumming into their heads that they've got to have all their assets in line, and their trademarks, and they need to be owned by their proprietary limited companies and all of those kinds of things.
Yes.
And I don't know whether that's where this question is coming from, but if you've got any other insight in what else people can do to set up a brand well from the beginning to eventually get acquired.
Yes, of course. So there's a few different things that people can do to kind of prepare their business so that it's ripe for acquisition. One is, as you say, around the clean accounts, and by that I mean it's incredibly important that people. This sounds basic, but that people keep their personal or their other business assets separate from in each brand. And the number of bit sellers where they have like 5 different businesses all going to the same account, and you're trying to tease apart, was this expense related to this or this, or it gets very difficult to go through that process.
And it is hard when you're a one-person show because, for instance, your everyday things like your internet and what have you will be for everything that you're doing. But when it comes to at least the assets, you want those to be separate under the one umbrella.
At least with a minimum of a separate bank account. Like I've seen people running multiple businesses, including some of their personal stuff, their sole trader stuff, and a company thing. They're trying to run the whole thing out of one bank account just because that's easier for them. Yeah. Don't do that. That's nothing to do with being not just if you're being acquired, but keep it neat and tidy for your accountant for every purpose.
Yeah. Exactly.
But apart from that, is there anything else that they should be looking forward to?
Yeah. So one of the other things is, one of the questions that we will ask sellers is, how many hours a week do you put into your business? And in general, the lower the answer, the better, as far as we're concerned. And so there's lots of different ways that people can automate the management of their businesses, which means that they have to put in less time, and that can be through investing in software. It can be through outsourcing stuff to VAs in very low cost locations. But yeah, just on the software point, we would definitely recommend that people get kind of third-party seller dashboards. It makes it much easier.
I recommend. Hashtag Helium 10. Exactly.
Yeah, Helium 10. From an kind of accounting perspective, A2X is super useful to tie things back to your Xero account or whichever system you use.
A2X and Xero, absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, Xero is a must. Yeah, Xero is very important, I would say. And then, but then on top of that, one of the other things you can do is kind of trim the fat of your business, as we say. And what I mean by that is a lot of businesses will go down the path of launching into new products and geographies and platforms and all the rest of it, and it can end up with a bit of a web, quite a complex web of lots of things with tiny pieces in every part of the puzzle. And actually, it can be better to streamline the business and just focus on the big products, the kind of hero products, and make sure that those are in order.
So
I'm just laughing because my business has so many little pieces and things that have to interconnect. It's ridiculous.
Don't expand into the UK and Singapore and the Netherlands before you've actually made some money in Australia and the USA.
That's exactly right.
So don't buy your 10th product before your first and second one have actually made you a net profit. These are don'ts. These are just gold. I'm loving them. And also get all your trademarks, get all your accounting software.
Absolutely.
Put it all under a proprietary limited. Can I intercept now with a question that I got yesterday, and I answered that yesterday to my team.
Yep.
But and I'll tell you what I answered later. But the question was, we've got a couple of sellers who are just about to go from sole traders to proprietary limited. They're going to transfer everything over. And for a second there, because they've got some accountants set up for appointments and what have you, the question was, should I get an LLC instead?
In the US.
In the US. And my answer was no. You tell me if I was right or wrong.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. If you're unless you have kind of real staff members and all the rest of it in the US, there's no reason to get an LLC, and they can actually make it.
Proprietary limited ever?
So there's a few ways that we can do the transaction in Australia. We would either buy the assets of a company and then you're left with the kind of shell of the business, or we would actually buy the proprietary limited itself. And that has an impact on the future liability of the business, but it also has an impact on how the seller account gets transferred over as well. We can talk about how.
Let me tell you from the point of view of the seller, what I turned around and said is that if I was ever offered a company, the full company and not the assets of the company separately, I would say no to the company, because I don't know what the other seller did 5 years ago and whether it's going to bite me 3 years from now. So as somebody who's creating my own business, I wouldn't be choosing my structure, my company structure, based on who is going to buy my business later, whether or not they're going to want my company at all, whether they're in the same country as me or anything else, because you could get a buyer in the US, you could get a buyer in Australia, etc. So that's from my point of view. Diane's come back to us from before, and she gave us a little bit more of information. The $1.4 million business that was interesting to us, is it still interesting to us if we are just a reseller?
So from an Uno Brands perspective, we don't buy resellers, but there are lots of places that you can get interest for your business if you are a reseller, namely Empire Flippers, and there's another website called Flippa, FLIPPA.com.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a good point. I think that obviously there's a lot of value in developing your own brands and things like that. There's also some very valid business models where you are working as a reseller and a partner with certain brands and things like that. And just because Adrian isn't the man for you in that situation doesn't mean that you don't have a good business. It's really a case of, if you're looking to get out and sell your business, then there's all sorts of different ways that can be done, whether it's to another person who's a small business owner who wants to take on the challenge of running a small business, or whether it's to someone who's wanting to consolidate into a bigger group. So continue learning, continue your journey, I guess.
I had a question in Messenger earlier today, somebody who saw the preview of this conversation, where the business has somehow gotten out of track for health reasons, very serious health reasons, I must add. And for the last year, there's been no money coming in. Everything's been shut down until some very important medical issues are resolved. This business has got about $30,000 worth of inventory to retail value.
Wow.
Is the inventory of value to anybody who would be buying a business, or are we looking at current?
Do you know if it's an own brand? If it's a private label business?
It's a private label brand that started working, got some profit happening, worked for about a year, and then So in those cases, it's as a business, we know that it's got zero value. As a brand, it's got zero value. It's not a known brand. It's not the future Coca-Cola or anything like that, and it doesn't.
But it sounds like there is a brand, and there's branded product that can be sold under that brand, etc.
Absolutely. Is that of any value to somebody like yourself, or is it of any value to anybody else who would be purchasing it?
I think from our perspective, we wouldn't be able to work with a company in that situation. But I do think there would be interest in that type of situation, though. From you could certainly imagine people looking to enter the space, of which there are huge interest at the moment. And I would think the best place to find those people again would be some type of online brokerage, which would pair people up.
Awesome. And how is the inventory valued in one case, and how would the inventory be valued within the space of purchasing a business or a brand or the whole business?
So you're saying how would the inventory be considered in this particular situation?
In this situation and within separate questions?
How do you value inventory in general, basically?
Oh, got it. Yeah, sure. So good question. So inventory is valued at cost, and what I mean by that is there's a kind of strike date when. No. So there's a date when the transaction completes, and we will buy all of the inventory at the price that the seller has put into the inventory up until the point that we sell it. So, for example, they might have done the manufacturing, but it's not been transported to the ship or whatever, and so we would buy it for the value that they have spent on it so far. We would then take over the liabilities of the business moving forward, and so we would then pay for the transfer to the shipyard. In certain circumstances, when the inventory is very large, we actually buy the inventory only when it comes into the Amazon warehouse, and the reason for that is because it can be very difficult to fully certify all of the inventory. However, at the moment when it goes into the Amazon warehouse, then Amazon itself does a check, and then everybody knows, what the inventory is.
Inventory is there.
Yeah.
What about inventory that's been sitting in the Amazon warehouse already, like existing inventory in the Amazon warehouse?
He just explained that. Yeah, it would be at the landed cost within there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's my understanding anyway.
That's right. Yep.
Yeah. Awesome. All right, so we've already answered how can we prepare our business for sale. Any other tips on that? What else makes the business valuable apart from our?
Well, I'd say there's a few. So one of the things is that for us, and I think for a lot of people, we're interested in categories which are pretty safe categories. So kind of home and living. Kitchen, pets, outdoors, those types of things. But we are nervous of kind of more risky categories. So supplements, electronics, apparel. Apparel has an incredibly high return rate, and so dealing with that, is tricky, as well as keeping up with the ever-changing fashion trends is quite high risk. So I'd say when you're deciding which products to launch into, that's one factor to consider. The other thing is the kind of cyclicality of the product. So products which sell 70% of their sales in November and December are also much higher risk for us. I think in terms of what would be the ideal product for us, would be something that maybe you think of like a mop with some unique feature to it. Maybe it packs down into a smaller size, where it's people are buying it all year round. It's a home and living everyday product. It's got something unique to it, and maybe the fact that it folds down to a smaller size, maybe that means it takes up less space in an Amazon warehouse, and therefore we're able to charge a lower price than full-size mops or whatever it might be.
Everyone's scribbling down frantically, writing "buy mops, folding mops."
No, I mean, yeah.
No, it's an example. I'm just joking. Yeah.
So that's one thing to consider is which space you're entering into.
Yep. Yeah, cool. So let's say you find a business and the business is a really good suit or fit. Suits really well, is a good fit. Initially you look at it and you think, yeah, that sounds like a good thing. What's the process there? Is there some sort of due diligence, or is what
Yeah.
what sort of thing do you go through with the business to determine if they're a good fit for you, and or conversely, if you're a good fit for them?
Yes. So the way the process works is we will first do what we call the 1 week sprint DD,
Okay.
where we will look at, so DD is due diligence. So where we look at the kind of high level financials of the business, get a overview of the business, and we use that to put a valuation to the business and an offer to the seller. What the seller then will, if they like the offer, they will then sign a letter of intent, which gives exclusivity in both directions. And we will then enter a detailed due diligence phase, which takes about 3 weeks. And then the seller will get the money in their account at the end of 3 weeks. You're back, Kelly. Hello.
Yes. She does this.
Okay.
Her internet's rubbish.
Right. So as I was just saying, you then have a 3 week detailed due diligence process before the person receives the money in their bank account. In that detailed due diligence phase, we are going to do a pretty thorough search through the bank statements over the past 5 years. We speak to all of the manufacturers. We will read through the kind of reviews, check for any kind of black hat tactics that are going on. Obviously, that's very much to be avoided.
Nobody does that.
So that's what takes place in the 3 weeks. That process is also where the lawyers, each side will have their own legal support, and so we'll be drafting a contract. It goes back and forward 2 or 3 times in between the two parties, and it's a very streamlined kind of formulaic process once we've signed the LOI, and we get that done in kind of 3 weeks.
Yeah. So let's say that you've gone through your due I can never say that word, due diligence. Due diligence, and you've made an offer, and the people who are selling have said, yeah, that's a good offer, and you worked out what the ins and outs of it are, and all the lawyers are happy and everyone's happy. What happens then? Like, how does it get transferred to being a brand within your stable as opposed to the person running the brand themselves?
Yeah, so there are 3 ways that this can happen. One is an ASIN transfer, which is the most painful one, and we typically try to avoid it at all costs. That's where you transfer the individual ASINs across. The second one is a seller account transfer, and then the third one is that's when we buy the assets. If we buy the shares of the business, then the account gets transferred directly with the business itself. The one that's most common is the middle one of those, which is the seller account transfer. It's a process that takes about a week. It's quite a technical process. We've developed a pretty streamlined way of going through that process, but there's something that happens on the first day, then something that happens on day 3, and something that happens on day 5, and it requires quite a bit of attention because, as everybody knows, Amazon is very trigger happy. Yeah, and there's a risk that that the account gets closed down for a couple of days. But we have very close relationships with Amazon in Australia and globally in the US as well, and that's important because we need to keep those communication lines open while we're going through that process, just in case anything gets flagged or for whatever reason. I mean, that's for
and what if we were talking about a non-Amazon business? Let's say we were talking about a website business that's on, let's say Shopify, which is your favorite, and they're there and they're working away. How do you process in that case?
Yeah, so that's typically much easier to transfer. With Shopify businesses, you can just transfer the account over.
Domain.
The domain, exactly. Yeah. So there isn't a kind of risk of being closed down that there is with Amazon. So that's a much more kind of straightforward process. Yeah.
Do you want to address Julio's question?
You go.
Yeah.
Good. Your turn. You read out.
What is the usual time frame that a company operates successfully before you acquire it?
Yeah, sure.
Is there a usual time frame? Does it really matter?
Yeah, so in an ideal world, greater than 2 years is what we consider to be optimal. Between 6 months and 2 years is still doable. Less than 6 months, we would typically wait for them to operate for 6 months.
Probably wondering why they've got enough of a profit to fulfill the other requirements.
Yeah.
Now that's a get rich quick scheme.
And what if you've had someone who's been doing this for significantly greater period of time, like let's say maybe their business has morphed over the time, and let's say they're a website-based seller and they've been doing this for 6 or 7 years and they've built up the thing over a period of time.
Yeah.
Is that too long a time to build it up? Or
no, there's no upper limit. Yeah. No upper limit at all. The only reason where that becomes complex is if as I was saying earlier, we like businesses where the seller does as little work as possible, and in those types of situations, if people have inventory in their garage and this, that, and the other, rather than everything being nicely streamlined with a 3PL and manufacturers and all the rest of it, it can make the business more complex, which then is less attractive. But from a time frame perspective, there's no limit.
Yep, cool. Sounds good. And then after the business is acquired and it's part of your stable of brands and it's all integrated, what do you then do to obviously you said that earlier that there may be still some consulting involvement or some future profits for a certain set contracted period of time. What do you actually do to grow the brand to sort of get everything happening to make everything great? How does it all work?
Yeah, good question. So there's two sides to this coin. There's the kind of cost side and the revenue side. On the cost side of things, as I was alluding to earlier, there's big very significant benefits, scale benefits of moving these businesses together, in terms of the operations and the finance, and even just like banking and reporting and all the rest of it. It can be very streamlined very quickly. Also, from a procurement and supply chain perspective, there are big savings to be had there. And then on the revenue side of things, we typically will look to pull on 3 levers. One is geographical expansion. So a lot of the time, the businesses we acquire will operate either just in Australia or just in the US, or 1 or 2 marketplaces. We're able to turbocharge the growth of the businesses by expanding across multiple geographies. Obviously, that requires quite significant investment, and that's where one of the big pieces of value that we add is just the ability to invest in the business. The second lever is channel expansion. So a business that operates, for example, in the US on Amazon, the natural places to go from there would be Walmart, Target, even for some brands. In terms of geographical expansion, you might be expanding to the UK or to Canada or to Australia. So those, you get those 2 levers, and then the third lever is just around sharing best practices from a marketing side of things. It's difficult to keep up with all of the ways that Amazon changes its algorithm and all the rest of it, but once you manage a portfolio of products, you can really take the things which work well in one product and just shoot them out across all of the other products very, very quickly, and that leads to pretty significant growth.
Awesome. Sounds pretty exciting to me.
Yeah, it is exciting. I'm having a great time, to be honest.
So you've got a little bit of an accent. What's your background? Where are you from?
Yes, I'm from the UK. Yeah. I've been from London. Yeah, but I've been in Australia since July. your beautiful country. I'm very, very glad to be here rather than in London right now.
I was going to say, I bet it's better here right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And although we did have the last day of Retail Global shut down on us because of COVID,
Yeah.
it was one case in Brisbane or something like that.
Exactly, that's it. Yeah, compared to the hundreds of thousands in the UK.
Nothing like comparison.
But talking of Retail Global, we have this Friday is the catch-up day in Sydney for anybody who's around, and Callie and I will be there.
Oh no, I'm not going to be in Sydney. I'm not going to be in Sydney.
Oh, you're not going to be in
Melbourne,
okay.
right? I'm going to be in Melbourne. No, absolutely. I wish I was in Sydney. But yeah, let me. I will be making. I think I'm making an announcement in about 20 minutes or so about the three. So anybody who hasn't done so yet, they've got three.
You got some days to make up for the day that we missed out at the third day of things. So if you had a Retail Global ticket and you missed out on day 3, as we all did, and you were there, Retail Global's organised a day in Melbourne, a day in Sydney, and a day in Brisbane.
It's called the Roadshow.
Roadshow, yes.
And essentially what it is instead of all of us going to the Gold Coast, the Gold Coast is coming to us. So there's going to be, one in Sydney this Friday, one in Melbourne on Tuesday, and I think next Friday is when Brisbane is happening. If you don't already have a ticket, you can still buy one. But if you had a ticket for Retail Global in the Gold Coast, you get in free, I think. I've got to read all of that. Yeah. And go and have a drink with Adrian. He's going to go and visit. And come and have a drink with me because I'm going to be at the Melbourne one on Tuesday. And where do people reach you, and what would they be contacting you with? What kind of information will they be giving you?
Yeah, sure. So you can reach me on my email address. You can reach out directly. It's Adrian at una-brands.com, and Una is spelled UNA. And very happy to have a chat if people have any interest in acquisition for their business, or just to find out a bit more about the process. We've kind of scratched the surface here today, but if you have any other questions about how it works, I'm very, very happy to jump on a call with people.
And feel free to mention that you saw it on this podcast, because we'd like to know where his various efforts in contacting people are coming from and what's working. So that'd be great.
Yeah.
And what will they need to pretty much? So
if people decide that they want a valuation done for their business, and this is a kind of no obligation valuation, which we're very happy to provide people with, then they will need to provide us with their last 12 or ideally 24 months P&L. And if it's an Amazon business, then we would typically get view access to their Seller Central account. We can just do that with screenshots as well, but we would typically get view access to the Seller Central account for the valuation.
But I'm guessing there will be something set up after you have the initial conversation. So first thing to do, don't go sending your profit and loss in your first email. Just get hold of Adrian, and I'm sure he'll be very keen to speak to anyone who's in the position where their business may be a good fit for this.
Exactly.
Awesome.
Was there any last words you had, Adrian?
It's been great to hang out with you, comedy duo that is.
The only real comedy here is the lighting on my face right here. I look like an absolute mood face here. I'm going to need to fix this lighting. That's the funniest thing about the whole thing. Thank you. Yes, I've never heard that before.
I was streaming like that for years, and then I brought a lamp right in front of me. Decided to bring the lamp. Awesome. Well, thank you very, very much for coming and giving us all that valuable information. There's so many people that have been asking me what it is that they need to do, and that's really, really important. But also there are sellers that are ready to make the jump. One thing that I want to say is don't leave it until you have to and need to. If you're at a point of your business where it's valuable, because I have made that mistake more than once. You've got a business that is valuable and you're getting to the point where you're seeing that you can't grow it with your own funds. Obviously, this is not your only option to growing your business, exiting and using Una brands to purchase, to acquire your business. But look at your options and absolutely make sure that you don't miss out on that opportunity, because a few months down the track, your business might not be worth anything.
And what some sellers say to us as well.
That's my experience.
What some sellers say to us as well is yes, obviously the lump sum payment is important and the profit share and all the rest of it. But people say, wouldn't it be amazing if in a year's time can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh yeah, wouldn't it be amazing if in a couple of years' time they were, walking down the street in London or whatever, and they saw their product on a billboard, and it's the opportunity to kind of turbocharge your business, which is
it's a relief to know that you don't have to be in the everyday trying to growth hack while you're actually living on whatever funds you're taking out of it, etc. It's just
I think as well, a good point though, I was just thinking, is that the skill set involved in coming up with a creative idea and launching a product and everything like that is a bit different to growing it to a global brand or growing it to the next phase. It's a different skill set, and some people are better at one and some people are better at the other. If you're the sort of person where you get that passion about the idea of launching this product and coming with this next idea, maybe it's an opportunity to have someone else who wants to grow brands deal with it, and you can come up with your next great idea to sell to him next time.
Yeah,
absolutely. But usually with an Amazon business, it's literally cash flow. It gets to a point where it's growing so much faster than what you can actually catch up with, and people like Adrian come and save the day like the Superman he is. Well, thank you so much once again, and everybody, give him send him a message. We're going to be around. There's going to be another announcement in the group in a few minutes, just telling you about the road shows. I look forward to seeing you all in person if you're at the Melbourne one, and I'll see you online as well. Bye.
Bye,
everyone.
See you, everyone.